And hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Reaching and Teaching Podcast. My name is Robinson. I'm obviously joined by my co-host, Johnny. But today, fellas, we got something different. We know we've been doing trivia. We did some news episodes. We even recapped The Last Dance. But today, we got an interview, our first interview of the Reaching and Teaching Podcast. We have James O Hagan from Wisconsin High School Esports, and he also has his own podcast. James, tell us what that podcast is.
First of all, Robinson and Johnny, I got a couple of New Yorker guys, right?
Yep. Yes.
I mean, my whole family is basically practically from the East Coast. So, when I was asked to be on here, I had to be on. But yeah, I host the Academy of Esports Podcast. I also oversee our virtual learning program and our esports program here in the Racine Unified School District. So I've got 5 of my own teams. They're not mine, but we have 5. I oversee 5 teams. Yeah. And I've been involved with Scholastic Esports now since about 2013, 2014 was when we got launched. So it's been a bit. It's been a heck of a journey. It's been a lot of fun. And thank you so much for inviting me on here today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad that you were able to come on. So let's first talk about, you dove into the 2013. You were working with technology, and it says in your when I found you on your LinkedIn, it says you were a retired rugby player.
Mostly.
How did you end up into esports from that?
Well, rugby is just like, people go like, oh, that seems like a really odd, thing, but it's a worldwide sport. I've always found odd ways to be part of things in school. Like rugby was my connection in college, right? It was my spring thing that I did. In the fall, though, I was in the marching band at Purdue University. So you can think about going from band geek to rugby guy, is a little bit different. But what's been cool about all that is that even in high school, when I was doing plays and I was still doing track and football, but I was involved in music and drama, it was amazing how I found those things that kept me in school. Those are the things that kept me going, right? It wasn't, there's the love of learning and all that other stuff, but for some kids, they need things like this to bind them to their friends, to bind them to their schools, to give them positive experiences. Because a lot of our kids don't get positive experiences, in school and sometimes even out of school. So these are the things that they look forward to. These are the things I know when COVID hit, we had a number of kids who, I say it's almost like Thanos snapped his fingers and made them disappear. But really, it was hard. I mean, for some of these kids. And I know that a lot of my general managers, me included, we actually kind of mourned, if you will, the loss of the connections that we had to these kids. And it's so nice to have most of them back. We're not perfect right now, but we have almost all of our kids back. And we're looking forward to have a big season. But to go from rugby to this, I mean, it's just, you got to just love kids. You got to love working with kids, especially being an educator and trying to find those ways to get those kids who, how many, when I started teaching in 1999, wow, I almost said 2000 something, but in 1999, I started teaching 5th grade students, and it was all about Pokemon, right? And these kids could go through and they could talk about Pokemon all day. They bring in their cards. And it was like seeing them engage with each other, even though they were very different culturally. Maybe they had very different backgrounds or whatever, but still, finding this love through Pokemon was just something that was very cool. And then we actually started in 1999. I started teaching kids how to network computers together and starting to play StarCraft. StarCraft was the first game that a lot of these kids played, and we did it as teams and we did it as one-offs against each other, and we made it competitive. But what I also noticed were the number of kids who were showing up for this experience and who weren't into the games. They didn't care about playing games. All they cared about was hanging out. And did I kick them out and say, sorry, you're not playing StarCraft, you got to go? No, it was like, hang out, let's have fun, let's talk about this stuff, and let's get them engaged as well too.
Yeah, so I just kind of want to just jump on what you talked about there. I think you kind of touched on it a bit there about the community, right? The community in the sense of togetherness and belongingness that goes into kind of even the early ventures of esports. Talked about Pokemon and such. And so I feel like it's just kind of dive deeper into how you've seen the evolution of esports in terms of how it brings a certain segment of kids together who may be from different cliques, because in middle school and elementary school and stuff like that, a lot of these kids have their own little cliques and whatnot. But they're always kind of come together over a game, right? And they kind of have that sense of belongingness, togetherness, and also hey, I might be doing this, but I really love this game. I really watched the show, et cetera, et cetera. So explain that and how you've seen evolution and how it has evolved over time.
Well, I mean, the evolution right now in esports, of course, it's a $1.4 billion a year industry. It's a segment of the $160 billion esports industry. It's not a very big one compared to excuse me, did I say esports? It's $160 billion gaming industry, 1.4 billion for esports. But what I'm always amazed is now how people are trying to make money off of this with kids, right? They're trying to find the ways to profit from this. But what it really comes down to is you can't turnkey a community, right? You can't say, you can't set up like, oh, we're going to create a community for you. No, that work is not done by the people on the outside. That work's done by the people on the inside. Those are the work. Yeah. Yep. That's the work that, when if I was to say like, hey, if you do what I do here with our esports program in Racine and you do it up in somewhere in, let's say Bronx, right? Is it going to work? Probably, maybe, or probably not at all, most likely, because my community is very different than what the community is that's trying to do. So I can't say take what I do and do it elsewhere, because that community aspect of it, how we build it, even the rules that we set up around that community can vary greatly. For example, in my community, I know that we've got a problem with kids on the street after school because it can be an unsafe community in some spaces. If a kid's not making their grades, traditionally in high school athletics, they're kicked off teams. They're told, don't come back until you have your grades all together. And what typically happens is those kids don't come back. I've seen it more often than not that those kids, when they're removed from a team, don't come back. And what do they lose? They lose the camaraderie of their friends, and they lose a positive adult interaction who's trying to do good things by them. So with our esports program, for example, I tell them, look, the kids don't have to start in the varsity level competitions, but let's keep them around. Let's keep them engaged. Even if they're sitting in the corner doing their homework, you're keeping them in a safe space where you know that they got their friends and they'll get supports, and there's they can see that pathway back. That's just an example of how community becomes so important, and how esports, especially at scholastic level, becomes something so much bigger than the games. It's bigger than the computers that we're building and buying. It is really, again, the core of this becomes truly, how can we redefine athletic culture and how can we engage kids in this space?
Yeah, and I think I agree with you, James. Like we here at CI, we try to do the same thing. We work with underprivileged schools, like in certain communities, and what we try to do is we try to give them something like you said, scholastic game. We try to give them something where, hey, you may not want to go home, or you want to you're not going to go home, but you want to find something to do, and that's what we try to do there. We try to give them something we could play, because our specialty is NBA 2K. So what we try to have them do is that we have them come play 2K, learn something about the games, engage with other classmates, get to know them, and then have teammates. I remember Johnny and Jad, who is our head guy at CI, like the main guy. He told stories about two kids in the classroom, and they didn't want to be partners with each other, and then they saw all the kids playing, because if you don't want to be partners with each other, then you don't play. You have to learn how to cooperate with others. And later on, they saw everyone gaming and having fun. They say, you know what, let's try to come together and play games. And they ended up playing, and then they ended up, John, I believe they ended up like dominating, I believe. Is that true?
Yeah, they actually did really well. So it's just, you never know, right? And so until you actually try and you put them in that situation, in that environment to succeed, right? And so again, like we kind of mentioned earlier, was that like, you may be from different backgrounds. You may not want to necessarily play with that particular person, but you might never know that you might have a lot more things in common than you realize when you actually meet and talk to these other kids around you. And I think that's also the really fun part about games, because I think games sees no boundaries, right? There's no limitations to really games and what you're going through at home, because the game itself is just a game, and we all can play it. We all can have fun playing it. And that's the beautiful thing about, video game industry in general, and that's obviously esports within high schools and obviously in the collegiate level as well.
Well, what's great, and you brought up 2K, and I got to say that I love the game. I suck at it. I'm terrible. I love it. I'm going to tell you why, for a few reasons. Number one, developers by and large are very difficult to get hold of, right? To get person to talk to is like, hey, we're doing this thing, we need some supports. Finding that right person to talk to is always hard. I was able to reach out to Andrew Buck, who heads up the NBA 2K team for the Milwaukee Bucks. And it was like, he gave me his phone number, text, call, whatever support you need, whatever help you need. The Bucks and the NBA 2K league has been responsive, right? And that's, I think, is a cool thing for kids to see. It's great for educators to see too, with somebody who takes interest in our scholastic and how we're trying to grow things. But what I also love about 2K is that it's one of those games like Rocket League that's real easy for kids to step into, right? Mm-hmm. You can with a little bit of practice, you can become good at it and really get, intricate. And above all that, I surveyed a series of 7th and 8th grade girls last year in our school district. and I asked them what games do they play. And do you know what the number one game was that they said these 7th and 8th grade girls said they play?
What was it?
Well, it was Call of Duty. And I said, well, I can't do we can't have you doing Call of Duty in school. Yeah. But, the second one, there was a lot of Minecrafts, and there was a lot of girls who said Roblox, and there was a lot of girls who said The Sims, but the number 2 game was NBA 2K. And when I asked them, I said, why is it that NBA 2K is a game that you play? What was really fascinating to me was it wasn't just that they like basketball, but it was because their brothers played, and they wanted to play with their brothers, and they wanted to kick their brothers' butts. Mm-hmm. So, there's these interesting family dynamics that also take place through video games. Dad plays this or mom plays this, can trickle down to the kids. I know my kids, they play a lot of the same games that I used to play back when I was a kid, or when I introduced them to Legend of Zelda or Mario. It's kind of like introducing your kid to an old record album and then kind of like starting to like bob their head and go, okay, I can get it. Or like, what's great about, like, for example, I grew up in the 90s, and, hip hop, of course, West Coast hip hop was growing up very big, and there was a lot of sampling. And it was because of that sampling that I started to get into like Parliament Funkadelic, like that 70s funk music, trying to find where did that sound come from? Kids are finding that now with games. They're like, well, where did that character come from? And they're going back, like, the Final Fantasy games, or even jokingly, I know a lot of kids who love to play NHL 94. NHL 94, 95. Why? Because it has fighting and blood in it in a hockey game. It has a high replay value, but it's funny how video gaming, like music, is starting to build these kind of connections between kids too, where they're starting to go like look at old, the old quote unquote old titles, and really trying to maybe bring them back a little bit, even like things through speed runs, or just exploring, or just enjoying the fact that they can access these games very easily.
James, take us into the program. You tell us what you do. You tell us that you're with the high school of Wisconsin, and you try to and your purpose of the program. Just take us inside and take us more in depth of your role and what how's the program operate, and what games do you essentially play around?
Right. So I am lovingly called the esports czar because, and I say esports czar because we have an athletic director for the school district, and he was basically like, I don't know what that esports thing is, but you just keep doing it. So that's, there's all these athletics and activities, and then me doing esports. But, and I like it that way. I'll take it because I did all the work to get the program started. But what's been great about it is a couple of things. Number one, our program is, when we're able to all be together, isn't 5 high schools competing in 5 different spaces. It's 5 high schools competing in one single space in the city of Racine. Now, the city of Racine is like a microcosm of the United States. Okay, we have the city, Racine City, and we actually have suburbs around us. We've got Mount Pleasant and Sturtevant and Caledonia. Those are what you would consider suburbs. So about 76,000 in the city and 30,000 in the suburbs around. Right. So you've got economic depression, you've got gang violence, but you also have SC Johnson headquarters here. You also have Lake Michigan. You've also got one of the most beautiful beaches. You've got downtown. You've got big factories. Like I said, we're a microcosm of the United States. Putting all 5 high schools together, people told me I was crazy. They're like, you can't put, the North Side high schools together with the South Side high schools because gang problems and everything else. And what we have found is that really having a single space that we all play in together has become a bit of the secret sauce, if you will, that these kids have found, even though they're on different teams, even though they wear different jerseys, they have found more commonality between each other. They have found that they can call on each other, even though they may not live in the same zip code, they can still call on each other. I'll tell you, one of the kids a couple of years ago had turned 16 and had his birthday party at the gaming lounge where we all play. It's called Not Your Parents' Basement in downtown Racine. And what was cool about that was all these kids showed up from all the different high schools for his birthday, and he had never had a birthday party before. Like, never had a birthday party. And they just had and it was just this huge gaming session that they had all afternoon and into the night at Not Your Parents' Basement. So it's, as we're talking about, like building our communities, it's organic. But it was a matter of, like I said, putting us all together in that same space. If we had done it separately, I don't think we would have had nearly the benefits that we have seen from all this. Now, as far as the games that we play, we do participate in the Wisconsin High School Esports Association. The city of Racine by itself is also an affiliate for NASEF, though we don't really participate in NASEF games right now. But The Wisconsin High School Esports Association has been our prime competitive platform where we compete in Smash Brothers, Overwatch, Rocket League, and League of Legends. And of course, having all 5 of these high schools together, they beat up on each other, in preseason, but then they're also playing each other in regular season as well. So I'll tell you, the most beautiful and fun times is when you've got the high schools that are facing each other and they get to do it in the same space, because there's yelling and screaming back and forth, and it's just a ton of fun. But what we've started to do now this year is really look not so much at the varsity of where we're going to see our growth, but we're looking at how we can take our junior varsity and grow esports through our junior varsity program, because our varsity program is pretty well set in the games that we want. But we're looking at, again, titles like NBA 2K. Does NBA 2K have enough following in it that we can do something with it on a citywide scale to bring in more kids, different demographic of kids? Using our JV program, rather than saying, oh, we'll have a varsity team and a JV team, saying, you know what, City of Racine is big enough. We can have several different junior varsity teams, all playing all these games and peppering in varsity players to help coach and bring along those younger kids, or those kids who maybe want to have that experience and become varsity players in the future. So we're looking at ways we can do that. We're also looking at independent gamers. I'm really concerned about the narrowing of access to games. Riot has rewritten their community guidelines that basically says, if you want to play our League of Legends title, you got to go through Playverses. And I'm not cool with that. I'm not good with that. I don't think that it's good business to say, you know what, let's reduce the points of access that kids can have to play. I mean, we're not playing for prize pool money. We're not playing for, to go to Worlds or anything like that. We're a bunch of educators getting together and trying to do what's right and what's best for kids. And we want to give them a fun, positive experience where they get to be competitive and play against others. But when the community guidelines are written in ways that are so narrow that says, oh, you can only do in-house tournaments, again, where's the harm in us getting access to a free title that you're giving away to everybody else and saying, go play it, but now you're going to tell us that we can't play it in the way that we think is best for our kids. But again, we're meeting our kids where we're at. We even have partnerships with the Racine Public Library, where even this week where we've got kids who don't have access to a game at home like Overwatch, I was able to go over to the library, check out a laptop with Overwatch installed and give it to that kid so he's got it at home so he can play. It's become, our esports in Racine has become a community effort. It isn't just us in the school district running the program. It is the community also having a stake in all this as well too, whether it's through our gaming lounge or Not Your Parents' Basement, through the state association. The state of Wisconsin, we also have pending legislation to provide grant funding for homeschool, private school, and public school programs. It's pending and it's got to go through legislation, but at least, where else are people writing legislation to support esports with real dollars at the state level? It is such a multifaceted thing to just say, is your esports program about the games? It's not so much about the games, but goes back to the community that we're developing.
Wow.
I know I went on a big tangent there. I don't even know if I answered the question, to be honest.
You did. It's really interesting. You can go ahead, Johnny.
Oh, no, I was just gonna touch upon esports is such a great thing, and myself and Rob have been in this space now for only about 7 months, and we've kind of really enjoyed the process of how much it's grown in the span of time, especially during the pandemic. But we've also seen how these developers have also sought after the money as opposed to the community, right? I think you kind of dove into it with Riot kind of limiting that space and creating a barrier to entry. And so just talk about how in the sense of its ascension in terms of esports, how that now companies aren't really focusing on the gamer or the consumer as much as so they want to get the money in their pocket over the consumer.
Yeah, see, again, here's the model I can use. Teachers and the education market in general is very different than business as usual, right? Yeah. I'm fascinated at how some gaming companies and some developers are partnering with, how should we say, toxic individuals, but still want to do business with kids. That to me just blows my mind. I don't want to call anybody out. Do I? No, I don't want to call anybody out.
Show something. Go crazy.
All right. So okay, I'll give you one. Because it's not a terrible one. A company called AVGL has very publicly said that they're partnered with Dr. Disrespect. Okay. Mm-hmm. To me, Dr. Disrespect is not somebody who I want to put money in his pocket because, again, as an educator, on my personal side, would I watch his stuff? No, I don't. But as an educator, he's not the kind of person that as a school, I could say, go to my school board and said, we're doing business with a company that does business that is fronted by Dr. Disrespect. I would get laughed out of a board meeting as soon as they start looking at that guy's name. I'd get laughed out of that board meeting. Businesses that want to come do business with kids can't be fronted with toxic people and expect that schools are going to just go, well, that's fine. We're just going to look past that. We can't look past that. I could barely look past Riot's own problems that they had very publicly around harassment of women and lack of minority leadership in the company. That's not reflective of my students. That's not reflective of the values that I want my students to have. But, I had to balance with, I've got a lot of kids who like playing League of Legends, and so trying to find that. But, certain companies now I don't have to do business with. I don't have to acquiesce to their flaws or anything like that. And even recently, I was pushing back on a couple of them saying, you know what, I have a real problem doing business with you because of who you're saying is fronting your company. And so that's become, I guess, a huge thing for me. But what really bothers me, again, and it goes back to the narrowing of access, teachers can be incredibly loyal to brands. Like, for example, the longest time teachers have been loyal to Apple and they've been loyal to Google. Yeah. And the reason why they've been loyal to Apple and they've been loyal to Google is because Apple and Google will go to them and be their best friend. They'll do professional development with them. Apple, for the longest time, does all kinds of special events for teachers. They give teacher discounts, all that kind of stuff. If Riot would take half a minute and sit with a bunch of teachers and sell them on the idea of using Riot titles through educational means, you would have a loyal following of teachers who are going to work with not just 20 kids, but over the span of their career, think of they're working with maybe 160 kids a year over 20 years. That is potential Riot devotees, if you will. Not that I'm saying that I want to use kids in that way, but again, developers need to start looking at the scholastic space in the long game, not for the immediate short-term gains of, whatever. Because again, if you're already giving the title away free of charge, work with teachers and finding out how can you use this as an educational tool. One company that's starting to do a really good job of this is Epic. And my friend Steve Isaacs. If you don't know who Steve Isaacs is, he would be a great interview as well too. Steve is actually a Jersey guy, so he could probably, he's okay people, but he's doing some work around Fortnite and using their sandbox to develop educational platform using Fortnite. Fortnite is not a tool that people would typically think of as an educational tool, but we're finding ways to make it educational tools. And Epic now is finally starting to figure out like, oh my gosh, yes, we can use this as a teaching tool. And now it expands the footprint of our product into schools. And again, I don't want this to be about pushing product, but again, I want to be able to have partnerships with developers to make them realize just how important this is and the positive impacts that these games are making in the lives of kids now that we are actually bringing them into schools. For the longest time, we couldn't bring comic books into schools. We couldn't bring video games into schools. Don't shut us out. We want to help you. We want to use these as educational tools. Don't make it that these kids love to do these things and then say, well, sorry, now you can't do it. I mean, the schools are saying, let's bring them in, right? Mm-hmm. We should be, companies should be falling over going, all right, yeah, let's get our games into your schools. We didn't think about that before, but yeah, let's bring it in. So yeah.
I think you shed light on a great point. Like when we play, when we try to do 2K, right? One of the things we have is one of the things we try to do is like a 3-point contest. But unfortunately, you don't have the actual 3-point contest in the game. You have to go. The only way you could do this if you go to My Career or something like that. So I feel I agree with you. And then also another example is like if we were to try to delve into other games, they don't dive into the offline aspect as much as of a teaching aspect, because now that it's 2020, you go to more to the online aspect. Hey, play online, play with friends, all that. They kind of shifted away from the offline aspect. I remember when I played 2K, what's the main thing you do? Hey, come over to my house, play with me, and like that. You don't even think about my team or my career or anything like that. You think about doing it like that from that perspective. And then you miss those interactions that what we try to do, both CI and what you do, James, in Wisconsin. Those fun aspects, those fun environments of a bunch of kids playing in school. And I wish, I see what you mean. I kind of wish that they would shed some light on that offline aspect, because you want kids to learn. Not everyone can afford Xbox Live on a monthly basis or pay or PlayStation Plus or anything like that. You want to give them things to play, and here, try this. Or maybe parents are not comfortable with them playing on a lobby where you could be subject to cyberbullying or anything like that. You got to have possible stuff to do offline and also could learn. So that's what they should give us with that as well.
And that's a key to. Well, sorry, Johnny. There's a key point in that you're saying too, and I think it needs to be reiterated, is that again, this is having adults in the room, right? Typically, a lot of these kids don't have any adult interaction in the room, or somebody to guide them, or somebody when they do face cyberbullying or inappropriate content that they can turn to and say, "Hey, what is this? What's going on?" We're creating these walled gardens too for kids to have positive, fun play. The only way we're going to change the culture of gaming is by teaching kids how to live in these spaces. And for the longest time, and I know a lot of us grew up in these spaces where we didn't have a lot of adult interaction, but it was literally a Lord of the Flies experience. If you've never read the book Lord of the Flies, it's a bunch of kids who get deserted on an island and set up their own society. And in the end, it turns into them like being savages because it's a bunch of teenage boys, right? We don't want that to be, that isn't our experience either with esports. And again, we are redefining not just the athletic culture by being in the esports space, but we're redefining what gaming culture is and what is acceptable and what's not, and bringing light to when they are being toxic. I know I had kids who are mushroom stamping people in Smash, and I'm like, you can't do that, and they're like, why? And you have to explain to them, about good sportsmanship and things like that. And I'm very proud to say that in the state of Wisconsin, one of our Overwatch teams, which is also one of the best in the state, did get the citizenship award. And that to me was meaningful beyond all else, because that means that part of our program is succeeding. The other part that I know why it's important to have these spaces of safety for kids is because there's a lot of great girls out there and kids who don't identify as boy or girl who don't feel safe playing. The video games should be fun for everybody, but there are some kids who just don't get a fun experience because when they go online, people hear their voice, so they pick up on, race or gender, and it becomes a savaging. Like they just get beat up for who they are. And what we do here again is create these safe spaces for kids to feel welcome and enjoy playing again, like they should.
Yeah, I just want to talk about what you talked about winning the citizenship award and how much that meant to you. What other cool experiences have you had with the program in your time there?
Okay. Well, see, I'm very hesitant about sharing student stories because those are student stories. There's too many. I'll say this: there's too many people in the education world who make their careers off the stories of things that kids do, not that they've done, but that kids have done. Mm-hmm. And I'm very hesitant about sharing that. But what I will say is probably one of my favorite experiences was there was a mother who was considering who wanted to learn more about our esports program, and I talked to her on the phone. She said, I got 2 sons. They're in high school, and I'd really like to have them come down and play and see what this is about. And they weren't even in our school district at the time. And I said, well, you live in Racine. Come hang out. We'll get you set up, okay? So the kids come down, and immediately I knew that I was in for something because both the boys were highly autistic. And they came in expecting to sit down and play video games. And it was not meant to be that they were going to play video games that day. And I could see right away that their expectations for coming in and playing games was not going to be met because, again, we had Overwatch practice going on. But luckily, I had a number of boys sitting in the back playing Smash. And I said to the boys, we have Overwatch practice going on over here, but I introduced them to the boys who were playing Smash. And I said, would you guys mind if they sit in with you and play some Smash? Boys are like, yeah, absolutely. Have them sit down. You would not be able to tell coming out of that instance that these 2 young men who I had never met before were autistic. They mixed right in with these guys. They got right down to playing Smash, and they were having a lot of fun doing it. And I have to say that these young men from our school district who welcomed them in, there was the invitation to play, right? That's the thing I think that's missing a lot for a lot of our kids is that invitation. That invitation was suddenly there. It created a really positive experience for these kids. And what turned out later was that the mom then dropped her kids out of the school district they were in and put them into our school. it was speaking to just, I think, the safeness of the space. And it spoke a lot to of the character of the kids who said, you know, I don't know who these guys are, but we'll let them come in and play. I mean, it was amazing to see. And that to me spoke high volumes of the kids that we work with. You know, the city of Racine doesn't get a lot of positive news a lot of times. We're just north of Kenosha. So, you know, there was a lot of, obviously there were the riots there recently for Jacob Blake, but we're like sister cities. And there is, you know, Racine and the Racine area got rated the number 3 worst place for African Americans to live in the United States. And to say that now we are creating a space that not only is safe for kids to come in and play, but also is accepting of everybody, and recognizing that we are being accepting of everybody because we have kids who are coming back to us year in and year out. That to me that's a huge win in all this.
Wow, that's a really compelling story.
I mean, yeah, like it's amazing because again, like what you're doing over there in Racine and what we're doing over here in New York, you know, in the educator side for us, CEI, and what just kind of after school version of this, it's amazing to see how much power we have in terms of influencing a lot of these kids and bringing them together for many different reasons and kind of altering their lives a little bit. Because obviously these are rough times as it is right now, but you know, ultimately growing up in middle school, elementary school, those are rough times as well, right? You know, there's a varying different amounts of issues there that can come about as being just kids, right? And kids being kids. But using games in this platform that you and I both have here, Rob and I and you have, I think is awesome. And hopefully continues to grow because it really sounds like with that example anyway, and with the examples that me and Rob have had over the course of 8 months now, right, Rob? Around 8 months so now.
Yeah.
It's been incredible. And I think the kids are really looking forward to this growing and developing more and more and more to see what it can do. And hopefully, as time goes on, things like we're seeing can happen here in New York and happen in Texas, can happen in Chicago. Like more and more spaces can develop these type of impacts for kids. And I think it'll be pretty cool.
But it's important to reiterate, none of this is turnkey. It shouldn't start with what games are we going to buy and what computers do we need?
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah, no.
It's a matter of looking at your community and going, what do we need to do? Like, what are the goals that we have? Whenever a school leader comes to me and says, well, how do I start an esports program? I say, write down every school district has this on their website. If your school district doesn't have one, you need a better school district. Go on the school district website and you should have your strategic goals. Somewhere buried on that website is going to be your strategic goals. Your esports program should fit to every single one of those goals that your school is trying to do. That's the way you get money when you're in the face of a budget deficit. That's the way that you get support from a school board. That's why you get parents to buy in. And I will tell you that I have had parents buy in, and I'll share one more story just because this one involves me directly. And it was this is a funny one. It's not as deep as the other one. We were having our state finals a couple of years ago up in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. And it was cool. We put all 5 high schools on one single bus. We were calling it Fill the Bus. You know, we got filled the bus. All 5 high schools went out there because we had everybody in the state finals. And we were it was a Smash semifinal. And there was one kid who was playing, and his grandmother was standing next to me. And she, at one point, I could tell she's really into this, right? And she turns to me and she grabs my arm and she just goes, "This is so exciting." And I look at her and I go, "I know." But what it was, that was her first time she had ever seen her grandson playing video games in this way. This was the first time for many of our families that they had come up and seen their kids actually playing in live competition and seeing just how big this is. And when they saw, they went, "Oh my," it's like, "Oh my God, this is so much than just them going over to their friend's house and just playing a whole bunch of video games. Like there's dedication to this. There's jerseys. There's a coach. You know, they took a big bus. It's like we make a production out of it. So that's a key part to a lot of this too. Is that esports is serious stuff. Like if you're not gonna be serious about it, then you just have a gaming club. Then just have a game. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. Have your gaming club, because gaming clubs have their place too. There's a lot of kids who don't want to have an ultra competitive experience. There's a lot of kids who just want to play a few games and they want to do it in safe spaces. Do that. Don't turn your gaming club into your esports club. Have separate, because they're going to be very separate things too as well in all this.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a great point. So like you talk about the advice you would give to schools. What do you want to tell this kid's like, hey, I want to get into esports. Where do I go? What do you think? Because we try to show kids, when we try to have our podcast, we want to educate the kids as well with our news and the trivia. What do you think you should tell kids, like Where do I go so I can get into esports? What's your advice?
You know what? It doesn't have to be a teacher who is a geek. All right. It doesn't. If you've got that favorite teacher, that one who will do anything for kids, doesn't back down, will advocate for you. If you've got that favorite teacher, approach them with the idea of starting an esports club. One of my best advocates that I have in our esports program, his name is Greg Smith. Greg loves playing Dungeons and Dragons. He's an excellent dungeon master. But when it comes to coaching esports, he's garbage. Like he doesn't know the games at all. He tries his best, but he doesn't know the games at all. But what I will say about Greg is he is the strongest advocate for those kids. He will go to bat for those kids. He will do whatever it takes. And while he may not know the games backwards and forwards, and the kids will make fun of him about it, he is absolutely an advocate. And again, it doesn't have to be that teacher who knows everything. That's the hard thing too for a lot of these teachers, is that they can't always be the experts in the room with esports. And teachers are not used to not being the experts in the room. Usually they are the ones who know everything that's going on. So it is important for them for that teacher to also be that kind of teacher who feels safe giving up control to kids and working directly with kids. It's going to be a lot more of a two-way street than, being a football coach. Yeah, what high school football player goes up to their coach and goes, "I don't think you're running the offense right." Except for that cocky quarterback kid or that running back who's like, "Just throw me the ball all day," or whatever. But it's got to have that. It's got to be that special kind of teacher who just loves working with kids and wants to help them out, and it gets excited with the idea of helping them in ways that video games is fun, and we've got a lot of 20 and 30-year-old teachers who grew up with them and play them still. And it's like, let's start tapping that. Let's start tapping that resource that we have, that it is okay to play video games in school.
And I think to add to that, I think what's also important in dealing with that is that kids need someone to trust, right? The younger the kids are, the more they need to trust the individual that's leading them, because if they don't feel like they can really, give themselves to them and really trust in that teacher or that figure, then it kind of falls off the rails eventually. And so I think that eventually for a lot of those kids, that having that one solid figure you talked about, that they're a favorite, that they really enjoy, they really care about, is ultimately the best way to go, because they can actually really trust them and actually know that they got their back in the end.
And I think that speaks volumes too of the program that you're doing, Jad and everybody else, because there's a lot of how shall I say it? There's a lot of I don't call them partners, I call them pirates. There's a lot more pirates than partners out there right now. There's a lot of people who see dollar signs. They see kids. They don't see them as kids. They see them as revenue. They see them as a opportunity to make money. And I really appreciate the fact that the way that your group has worked to really make it about the kids, not make it about a dollar sign, not make it about an investment. This, if done properly, if you implement esports properly, the educational impact is going to become an economic impact down the road, because as you keep these kids engaged in school, as you keep them coming back, as you keep them positively involved, gaming culture is going to get better, school culture is going to get better, society will get better, especially because, again, there's this blurred lines now. Gaming used to be such this separate thing. Now gaming's involved in politics. Gaming is involved. Joe Biden has an Animal Crossing, island. Travis Scott's doing concerts in Fortnite. The blurred line between gaming and society is becoming blurrier and blurrier. So we want to make sure that we have kids who, when they step into those spaces, are going to be just as fine of adults as they are in the real world as they are as in the gaming world too. Okay,
I know you have to run, so we'll go over like two more topics and then we'll wrap it up here. So when we were trying to book this interview with you, you tell us there was a lot of madness trying to plan out this school year.
Oh my God, yes,
because of COVID. Just tell us for your program, how are you going about this upcoming time and these rough times with esports during COVID?
What we've done because our official esports season for the Wisconsin Association doesn't start until November. Typically we start in September, and it runs long. I mean, we typically run September to March, like end of March. So that's, wow. Football season only goes from August to November if you're lucky. Put it in perspective. The thing we decided to do these first couple of months is doing a lot more informal gaming nights, like getting kids just playing and not picking a platform, mixing up the platform, whether it's a mobile game, whether it's console, PlayStation or Xbox or a Switch, PC, whatever it is, we're finding all these different ways to just engage kids. And it doesn't have to be any big, long, weekly tournament. Sometimes they're just a couple hours, where you're just playing a few games, but trying to meet those kids where they're at. And again, showing them that the invitation to this is welcoming and inviting. That's been I think the beautiful thing. And I actually have a staff of people. I got to say, I have 12 general managers between these 5 high schools who all have their different skill sets and their different quirks, but they all, again, care about just engaging kids in really positive ways. And I think as COVID hit and we got over our cursing the darkness, and now we're lighting that candle. We are saying, let's make this what we can, so that we can, when we get going in November, we have more students who are more interested in this now than they ever were before.
Wow, that's great. I look forward to see what you guys will be able to do, because I think at the end of the day, it's important to give kids something to go to during these rough times. Because as soon as you get those times, you're like, oh, I'm finally out of class. Oh, I could play this game and do something competitive. That's what you want to do. That's what you want to provide.
Actually, it's funny. We're all in remote right now, and we have our own Discord server. And I'll tell you, the Discord server setup, I set it up like Hogwarts. So there's the general commons area, right? That's where everybody kind of communicates together. But then each school has their own channel. So they got their house, like Harry Potter's got their own house, and and it's a great analogy for it, because in Harry Potter, even though Slytherin are like a bunch of jerks, they all still go to class together, they all still play together, they all still interact together. But then they got their private space where they do their own stuff in house. And what's funny is at lunchtime, because they all have similar lunch times, it's funny to see how many kids are connecting over Discord and saying, let's get a round of Among Us going. And it's not just the teachers who are doing, or the kids, it's the teachers who are getting involved too into playing some of these games. Among Us right now is very popular. It's an easy game for mobile. It's easy to set up and get going. And that's been a huge part of this too. Again, setting up that walled garden. I'll tell you too, the Discord server is really nice, because one of the things I have problems with Discord is just the toxicity, how easy it is to be toxic in a Discord environment. We do have a memes channel, and when we first started that memes channel, there was a lot of re-education that needed to go on for kids about what was appropriate and what was not. But and this year we added a bunch of freshmen just recently into the Discord server, and I had to have that conversation. Like, this is appropriate and this is not. But it's not a punitive space. It's not a space to take a kid down and say, oh, sorry, you're being a jerk, and kicking him out. It's an education. We're using Discord as an education space to teach them how to be digital citizens. How do you interact with kids and other people? When do you use the @everybody versus maybe a couple of selectively pinging certain people? So that's also been a lot of fun too in all of this, is seeing just how kids are interacting over Discord and wanting to have these connections again.
Yeah, nice. Lastly, we're going to talk about it. You have a podcast. I brought it up at the beginning of the show. I saw some couple of us. I saw your episode. We did an interview with Samantha Anton from UCI right before COVID hit. That was a cool thing. I see you playing games with other people. I believe you are in multiple groups of people. Just tell us about your podcast and what's your goal with it as well, and some cool stuff about it.
Well, the Academy of Esports Podcast has always been the spot where it kind of helps me digest my ideas, right? It's kind of like my catharsis. It's my dissertation work. It's not just talking about my thoughts on esports, but also interviewing people and getting their ideas and thoughts too, and kind of fleshing out some of them. It is if you're an educator, it's meant to be a podcast that will allow you to pick up any episode and run with it. So if there's something you want to learn about, like how do you fund your esports program, I did an episode on that a little while ago. I probably need to go back and revisit that, because some things I know have changed. The interviews I always try to do, again, through the lens of finding connections back to what Scholastic is and ways that we are connecting through Scholastic Esports. And then there's another aspect too to the podcast. It's not really directly related, but I also host the Esports EDU chat on Thursday nights. Actually, we're recording on a Thursday, so tonight I'll have my Esports EDU chat, and we bring in a diverse group of educators to talk about esports. One of the problems I've got even today, there was a leadership symposium on esports, and all the participants were white, and we know that's problematic, because our students should see themselves in us. So our esports coaching staff is diverse, male and female, different races. It's important for them to see themselves in us. And we try to make our esports EDU chat that way as well, too, so that it is welcoming for all educators. Because we know that the statistics will tell you 97% of boys and 83% of girls are playing video games. That's across demographics. No reason should there be a leadership conference that is made up of around esports of all white people. Like, that just blew my mind that in that day and age. And here's the other thing too, as a leader in esports, this is important too. You see that stuff, especially when it's education or esports in general, you got to call that out. You got to say, look, we know that this is a much bigger platform, a bigger tent. That can't be acceptable. So also the Academy of Esports is shining the light onto these things as well. And being an advocate, one of the biggest things I did was the open letter to Riot when they rewrote their community guidelines and how it was going to be damaging to esports. And did it start a conversation? Yes. Did I get the changes I wanted? No. But now at least I know where Riot stands, and I can start to, again, look at Riot and start to pivot away. So, yeah.
And your podcast, you can find it on YouTube. And just lastly, James, thanks again for coming on. Where can people find you, and if you have any last words as well?
Sure. Yeah. I can be found at Jim O Hagan. That's at JIMOHAGAN on Twitter. You can find me on LinkedIn under James O Hagan, last name spelled O''H''AGAN. Or if you go on Thursday nights, search out the hashtag esportsedu, you'll usually find something I'm doing, but you'll also find the link to the esports edu chats on Thursday night. So that's typically where people find me. And weekly, I'm still weekly putting out the Academy of Esports Podcast, as you said. YouTube, it's on there as well, but you can find it Spotify. Even Amazon now just started doing podcasts, so it's on Amazon and iHeartRadio, all the platforms there too. So
yes, just make sure it's with an E, because when I looked you up on Google, I saw James O Hagan, the football player, just for a giant center. I
know that guy. Funny, I'll give you just a short thing. My grandfather actually played football for the New York Giants, and he was an undrafted free agent for the New York Giants. He didn't make the team. I know he played at Buffalo. He's from Long Island, but yeah, he and I we're in communication. He actually ended up playing in the XFL, and I think I'm the only person on this planet who has a DC Defenders James O Hagan football jersey. So,
and I know, Johnny, you're a big XFL guy.
Well, of the rebrand was actually doing pretty well before COVID hit and kind of had to shut it down,
that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
So, yeah, but it's awesome. It's a great league, and yeah, I mean, that's awesome. That's not.
And The Rock owns it now.
Yeah. Yes. I'm so happy that
he's gonna make it work. He'll make it work.
Yeah,
he makes everything work. When is he not making anything work? If he wants to get into the esports space, he probably wouldn't have like a great whole shindig.
The rumor I hear out there right now is that he is part of a remake of Big Trouble in Little China. If that happens, I will disown The Rock. Because Big Trouble in Little China should be left alone. So
yeah, for sure.
Well, that's gonna do it for this edition of the Reaching and Teaching podcast. If you haven't subscribed to us, give us a subscribe. I don't know what you're waiting for. We've had some really great content. This is our first video. We've done news, we've done trivia, we're diving into the interviewing world, and we got some more interviews coming on. This is just a sneak preview. We're just scratching the surface of what we can do. So thanks again for watching, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and thanks again, James, for coming on. Yeah. And yeah, stay tuned, guys, and enjoy your day. Stay safe.